Good evening, all. Since it's 8:05, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kevin Van Meter. I use he and him pronouns. I am the teaching fellow at the newly founded Scontras Labor Center here in Maine. Want to welcome everyone to our Real World Labor book release party. Without further ado, I'm going to begin by pasting an agenda into the chat for folks to review and also just to know what's coming up this evening. And then I'll go through that and we'll jump right into our evening's activities. First, we're going to begin with a welcome. We have a number of co-sponsors, and we appreciate the various labor centers here in Maine and in New York and New Jersey co-sponsoring this event with us, and want to make sure to acknowledge those. We're going to provide you a little bit of an overview of Dollars and Cents Magazine and the Dollars and Cents Project, as well as also a little bit more information, not just on real world labor, but the other books that Dollars and Cents has available for labor educators. I'll present just briefly on how to use this book. We have actually included a chapter for labor educators, academics, labor organizers, political educators, and others to make sure that the book is useful and engaging. We also have a couple hints and ideas there that might spark some interest for labor educators and organizers out there. We're going to hear from one of the labor educators that has been using Dollars and Cents for some years. And then we'll have some sample materials from the collection so folks can get a little bit of an understanding of what's in the collection itself. We'll conclude with how to order the collection and also some questions from anyone in the audience who might want some additional information. So welcome once again to our fourth edition of Real World Labor and our book release party here on Zoom for labor educators and organizers around the United States and even around the planet. We want to thank you all for joining Dollars and Cents Magazine, and tonight's event is co-sponsored by the Dr. Charles A. Scontras Center for Labor and Community Education, the University of Southern Maine, where I'm based, the Bureau of Labor Education at the University of Maine, the Labor Education Action Research Network at Rutgers University School of Management and Labor Relations, and last but not least, the Joseph S. Murphy Institute at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies. We appreciate everyone joining us. I'm going to pass it on to Chris Sturr, who's going to take on our next agenda item, talking about Dollars and Cents Magazine and the Dollars and Cents Project. And each speaker, as they take on their role, will introduce themselves as well. Chris, take it away.
I'm one of the three co-editors, staff co-editors of Dollars and Cents Magazine. Dollars and Cents is this year celebrating our 50th anniversary. We were founded by a group of economists in 1974 in the Boston area. And these were people who were disturbed by the rightward shift in the economics profession and wanted to start a publication that would reach a general audience and do analysis of the US and global economies from a left perspective. Just a little bit more about the history of Dollars and Cents. It's in what the tradition of what we call
I think we lost him.
Chris, have we lost you? I think we have. Living on the coast of New Hampshire, I have the same problem on the coast of Maine. We're going to have Chris come back and join us. Ben, why don't we go on to you and you can talk about the Dollars and Cents book collections, and then we'll have Chris, once he rejoins us, address some more about Dollars and Cents Magazine.
Certainly. So hi, everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Ben Beckett, he, him. I am one of the co-editors of Dollars and Cents Magazine, as well as one of the co-editors of Real World Labor Anthology. And of course, this event is mostly about the Real World Labor Anthology, but I just wanted to place it in the context of our publishing project as a whole. So in addition to the magazine, we publish a number of anthologies related to different topics in the economics and political economy sphere. So probably the one that's most relevant to real world labor would be Current Economic Issues, which is sort of an up-to-the-minute anthology of stuff we've published over the past year that really sparks conversations, I think, for students and also for workers about, sort of concrete issues that have happened in real life very recently. We also, our two other really big books are Real World Microeconomics and Real World Macroeconomics, which, as I think Chris was starting to say before he got cut off, one thing that Dollars and Cents really tries to do is to bridge the theoretical to the practical. So that's where the real world conception comes from, is that we always want to be educating people, both college students and others, but also to show why this matters, why this is not just sort of theoretical, but this has an impact on everyday people's lives. And I think that we took that a little step further with real world labor in terms of really trying to straddle the border of looking at labor education in the university context, especially for undergraduates, but also for worker education in a union education context. Two other books that I'll mention that I think would be relevant for folks here are Real World Globalization and Economics of the Environment. I think those are two books that we update every year with new material that I think are very relevant for the labor movement. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to our bookstore. And so you'll be able to see our entire sort of run of publications there. But I don't want to take up too much time with the other books because we want to talk about real world labor. So if Chris is back, pass it back to him. If not, I think Kevin was the next person on the agenda.
I'm back. I'm back. I could just, I heard most of what Ben said. That was a very ill-timed crash of my laptop.
Because what?
Can you hear me?
We can, Chris, go on ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that Dollars and Cents is in the tradition of popular economics, which is sort of this philosophy very different from mainstream economics, which thinks that, you don't have to be an expert to understand the economy and that people can explain the economy to each other. So we have been produced since 1974 by the Dollars and Cents Collective. We have staff editors, but all the articles are jointly edited by a group of economists and other academics, activists, journalists. We used to meet, weekly, and then we met monthly. Now we meet, about every 2 weeks. Now we meet almost exclusively by Zoom since the pandemic, which has actually made for a much more robust collective because we can meet more frequently. And we pride ourselves on accessibility. So I think Dollars and Cents, the Real World Labor was originally my project, and the first edition came out in 2009. And I'm really happy to pass it on to Ben as the lead staff editor and the 3 other co-editors who have really taken the book in a slightly different direction. It used to be, the first 3 editions were a little bit more on the labor economics end of what Dollars and Cents publishes. This new edition is really much more, even more accessible and much more on the kind of labor studies and labor education side, with lots of really lively stories and then a lot of background that will help people understand them. So I'm very excited about this new edition.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about how to use this book. In envisioning a new edition of Real World Labor, the last one came out a number of years ago, we didn't want to just update the material itself to give it more of a timely feel. We also wanted to make sure that this was not just something that could be utilized and useful for those in the social sciences or people teaching popular economics. We also wanted to make sure this was going to be engaging and helpful for labor educators and labor organizers. As someone who originally came out of higher education labor organizing and then spent a good portion of the last 4 years with low-wage healthcare workers in Oregon, one of the key things that I always try to do in my organizing is provide moments of labor education. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next few minutes. So for instance, something as simple as having a copy of one of the chapters from Real World Labor, an article from Dollars and Cents or Labor Notes or another labor publication, available as folks arrive for a meeting. We had a Stewart Council meeting or executive board meeting. Very often some folks would come a few minutes early. And then really into the first 5 minutes of the meeting, we'd have folks read an article from one of these publications from the collection itself, and then have a moment to reflect upon that and discuss it with other stewards or executive board members. And that really gave the opportunity to build a shared language, shared understanding, and also build up workers' capacities. So in envisioning this new collection, we really were thinking about the 14.3 million union members here in the United States, as well as also the millions of workers who would like to become union members. And we'd like to see this collection and, of course, the other labor publications that are out there, sister publications and the like, be utilized by labor organizers and labor educators. Let me speak a little bit more about the various kinds of folks we expect to use this collection. We're going to hear a little bit more from a classroom instructor shortly, but certainly classroom instructors in the social sciences and economics, political science, sociology, women's studies, and other similar fields have used Dollars and Cents articles and Dollars and Cents books in their courses, or really to base as their textbook for their course. So we're hoping that classroom instructors will continue to adopt this. And as I said, we'll hear from a labor educator in a few moments a little bit more about that. For those of us, such as myself, who work at labor education centers, we're hoping that real world labor will be useful for both credit and non-credit courses that are offered by labor centers. And we really invite labor educators to incorporate chapters, individual articles into trainings and workshops as well. So for instance, I here in Maine offer a Get Members Involved workshop. I've done that for the Maine AFL-CIO, for our local SEIU, our local union or local SEIU here in Maine a number of times. And incorporating into that workshop, certainly an article on the Chicago teacher strike from the collection, or what is labor, or what is a union, is a way of building that kind of shared understanding and shared language, and also allows for folks to have different kinds of experiences in a workshop, rather than just seeing PowerPoint slides or having one-on-one conversations or hearing a presentation. Incorporating this reading into the workshops as well kind of enriches the educational experience, and as I said, really builds a shared understanding. The What is a Union article that's in the collection, I happen to be the author of, was written as a result of working with some young IBEW members here in the state of Maine. They have an apprenticeship program, and a lot of new apprentices had not really had an education about unions or had the opportunity to work in a union environment previously. And in meeting with them and conversing with them and sharing drafts of the chapter with them, we developed this chapter to really provide a good, solid base understanding of what the union difference is economically, politically, in regards to health and safety, workplace democracy, and similar issues. So not only are we covering some of the economic issues here, but really some of the larger questions as well. So we invite folks to use that What is a Union chapter. Certainly it could be developed into an entire workshop as we have here, and we hope folks will take advantage of that. For labor leaders and labor organizers, as I said earlier, we hope that articles from Dollars and Cents and from the collection are useful for various labor education work that you're doing. Use it in the onset of a Stewart Council meeting, for instance, or use it as an opportunity to build up people's capacity. Take an article from the book itself and marry it maybe with something from a recent news source or a more recent issue of Dollars and Cents or Labor Notes or another publication. We also offer folks to print out articles and chapters, put it on your union's bulletin boards or in hiring halls. Include these kind of announcements and excerpts, or even, fuller material in your workplace and union newsletters as a labor education section, right? There's a lot of really good content being produced by Dollars and Cents, Labor Notes, Jacobin, and other publications. And we're hoping that folks will highlight those in their union workplace newsletters as a way of getting workers to learn about some of these issues and labor issues across the United States. We hope that labor educators will incorporate this material into conventions, conferences, and other events using chapters or articles from the book collection. Here in Maine, we have really robust AFL-CIO Central Labor Councils, and they have monthly meetings. We invite folks to utilize this material for that as well. And then finally, labor education is very often taking place outside of the context of the traditional or legacy labor movement. We see organizations like Democratic Socialists of America, the IWW, various study groups emerging around the United States, and we're certainly here to aid those who are so interested in using real-world labor and other materials in creating a study group. If this is something that folks have not done previously, certainly get in touch with us, and we'd be very happy to talk you through that. I've had the pleasure here in Maine and elsewhere as a labor educator to help folks set up study groups and set up a nice curriculum in order to meet their members' needs or their participants' needs, and we're certainly happy and welcome to do that. I'm going to pass this now on to a labor educator, Lynn, who will speak a little bit more about their experience using dollars and cents books in their own labor education.
You're muted, Lynn.
So sorry. I'm the noted labor educator, labor studies person. I was teaching at Indiana University until 2 years ago when I retired. And I was there for 24 years. So let me tell you just a tiny bit about that. It was a large program on multiple campuses of Indiana University, but on each individual campus, we had about 3 people. 3 times 6 is 18, but a few campuses had less. So we were, about 15 maximum at our, in terms of faculty and professional instructors at our high point, which would have been about 2003 or 4. And then we were attacked. And this is why you need to know economics, or labor educators, labor activists need to know economics, because 20% of our budget was just yanked. And, economics, most of us don't know economics in labor education. I was one of just a few economists at Indiana University, and we really couldn't fight back as effectively as we should have. For instance, there are hundreds of business school professors at Indiana universities, and there were only, what did I say, 15 at our high point. And now there are only 5 because we're being allowed to just die off with attrition when people retire. Because basically labor studies is a big threat to employers. It wasn't until about 2005 when one of our staff people decided that we would have an Organize Indiana website that the business community took note of what we were potentially going to be able to do or influence people to do, and yanked that 20% of our budget. And it's just amazing what happened to us and how important we actually were, being such a very small but vocal program, reaching out to unions in the whole state of Indiana. And we were spread out across campuses. These programs have existed since about the late 40s. Ours developed from a non-credit program into a credit program so that people could get some credentials learning labor studies rights and concepts. But that's going to fall by the wayside if we don't maintain it. And, it is falling by the wayside, I have to say. So it's quite urgent that, at this point when people are looking at what labor can do, that we also maintain labor studies programs to augment what labor can do, to leverage that. So I'm an economist. I taught labor and the economy, and I used real world labor. As soon as I realized that that was the perfect book, I switched from current economic issues. I always used dollars and cents materials, along with some textbooks, some progressive textbook or anthology. And To me, dollars and cents is sort of like Toto in The Wizard of Oz. So Toto is yanking the curtain away so that real people can understand the Scarecrow, and the Tin Woodman can understand what's going on behind that curtain. It's just obfuscation. It's just wizardry, the smoke and mirrors, and it's intentional. And basically, we need people to demystify it, to de-obfuscate. Sorry if you hear my dog barking. And that's exactly what dollars and cents does. I used it in all my classes: class, race, gender, and work, labor and the economy. What else did I teach? Oh gosh, work, family policy, FMLA. I taught the FMLA. I guess there were no dollars and cents materials for that. Sexual harassment. And so I taught both non-credit courses like FMLA tools courses, we called them, sexual harassment, common sense economics, utilities deregulation, the critique of utilities deregulation. And I taught these to unions and central labor councils. But then with the attack, we pretty much got relegated to university campuses, because what we had to do was improve our bottom line, because they'd taken 20% of our budget away. And so we put all our courses online because that was sort of a new thing at the time. And it was a way to increase revenues. In the process, we pretty much lost our off-campus courses because the university wanted to use us to make profit. I guess they don't call it profit, but same difference. We used to be subsidized because we provided a very important acknowledged service to workers, and we were no longer subsidized really after that point. But I wanted to tell you, let's see, what else about, oh yeah, I think that workers, activists need confidence. It's just so easy to sort of assume that these expert economists know what they're talking about and what's best for the economy. But in truth, I just want to say the economy is kind of like a shrub. You can cut it to the shape that you want. And we've seen that in other countries that, you know, France, for instance, has, I don't know what, 8% of its workforce in unions, but, I don't know, 80, 90% are covered by union contracts. So, and whenever there's an industry that has a certain percentage of unions within the particular industry, those conditions that the union negotiates are standardized across the whole country, the whole industry and the whole country. And so these things are possible. We just don't think of them here. And so we need to use our imaginations. We need to be as creative as possible. There are solutions for all sorts of things that people are told, no, you can only do it the corporate way. You know, we have the solution for this, that, and the other. So if we insist on transparency, make things understandable to ordinary folks and give them the confidence to ask the questions, and the political economists, the popular economists, as Chris calls us, accessible to help out and, you know, help instill confidence in the questions that are totally legitimate that people want to ask, and help them frame their questions and get real answers and bring about change ourselves. We can do it. So I have a couple of examples of ways that I used real world labor in my online courses, because by that time I was teaching exclusively online, but it works really well for discussions in either in-person courses or online, where you post a discussion question and you get all sorts of, you know, often we have unionists in our labor studies courses. And so we get all sorts of interesting people responding. So here's one. We were talking about in a discussion on causes of growing inequality and unemployment, I had asked the students to look at Bureau of Labor Studies statistics on unemployment by race. And so students saw, the obvious thing that, rates of unemployment for Black workers, Latino workers are twice as high as for white. And then this other guy who lives in Indianapolis who just wanted to add something different. He says, there's also a wage difference between race, not just unemployment difference, but a wage difference. The firm is more interested in a maximum profit. If he hires a Latino waiting for his US citizenship, he has the advantage over the worker. Price and demand are a large part of the firm's hiring the Latino at a lower wage. As the wage is lower, the profit is higher. The consumer will pay the more economical price. The firm will increase the production and spend money on new equipment because of the high profits. If you have seen the Latino landscaper, he is typically riding a very expensive mower. He is also driving a nice truck. This is an example of the margin and profit being high and the firm gaining a higher profit. So not sure if that was totally clear, but it's just an ordinary person talking about his observation that firms don't have to worry about the cost of labor. What they, save, they can put into, if they're hiring someone who's Latino, who doesn't have citizenship, put the money into giving the person a nice truck to drive. And, just grassroots observations like that. I think I probably shouldn't go on too much longer. And I'm thinking that, I set my timer, I'm already over, that we'll have this Q&A at the end. And I'd love to talk more about how to use these materials, how I use them, even though it's a few years old and it was a different edition of Real World Labor, obviously, since this is the latest edition, it's just come out. So thank you. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Lynn. We appreciate you. I'm going to pass it on to Kari, one of our other wonderful co-editors. And what I'm going to do in the chat is I'm going to post the 5 different chapters, which have numerous different articles underneath them, so that folks can see a general outline of the book. And then I'll post a link to the larger, more robust table of contents. But Kari, take it away.
All right, thank you. Yeah, well, really happy to have been able to be involved with this book and just to hear about people using these materials in their classes, and the fact that we still have labor studies programs around the country that are only becoming more in demand, I would hope. So I helped with some of the editing and selections for the book, and I was really happy to have one of my pieces included that I had done for In These Times magazine about the case for nationalizing the railroads. And I'll give you just a really quick overview of what that article delves into and why I think it's useful for students of labor going forward. So people probably remember back in the summer and early fall of 2022, the Biden administration was negotiating with the railroads, trying to come up with a deal that would address the concerns of railroad workers and railroad union leadership about just really an accelerating crisis in working conditions and service conditions and safety in the railroads that have developed into this strange quasi-monopoly situation where you have 4 major railroads, 2 in the eastern half of the US and 2 in the west, that control the vast majority of the business and are making $4 to $6 billion a year in profits, one of the most profitable industries in the whole country. And unlike electric utilities or gas utilities that are regulated monopolies and have also very dysfunctional and exploitive in a lot of ways, but do have a somewhat robust regulatory process imposed on them. The railroads are these almost de facto monopolies that in practice are very lightly regulated. And so workers, there's a dozen different unions that represent railroad workers, which has made it especially hard for workers to advocate for their own interests. There's a sort of divide and conquer situation that's been used by the railroad companies to their benefit, and just a lot of bureaucracy and sort of chaos and different interests at play in railroad labor negotiations. But nonetheless, momentum for a possible railroad strike was building over the summer and fall and putting the heat on the administration to negotiate a deal that would prevent a strike. And to sort of oversimplify some nuanced things, the leadership of the different railroad unions did agree to this deal, but then the rank and file members would have had to approve it for it to be enshrined. And several of the unions, including one of the biggest railroad workers unions with the conductors and brakemen, voted down the deal. And it looked like a strike was actually possible leading into the holidays in 2022. So over the course of this time, the railroad labor issue really exploded into the public consciousness and into mainstream media. And coming at the same time that, over several years of high-profile stories about Starbucks workers and Amazon workers, and really just growing support for union members as a whole, not to mention teachers. There was really growing public interest in what had been an ever-present yet sort of invisible workforce, the railroad workers who maintain the tracks and the trains and drive the trains that carry. And we're talking largely about freight because our passenger rail system has been largely gutted over the years. So anyway, Congress ended up passing a law so that the strike could not happen, and really one of the most labor-friendly administrations essentially prevented railroad workers from striking. And then in February 2023, you had the East Palestine derailment, and that just further underscored the dangerous and unaccountable position of these railroad companies, and just the real impunity that even after that happened, the recalcitrance, the refusal to pay for the cleanup, and really just the shirking of responsibility for this massive environmental and social and economic disaster. So that's all to get, I'll wrap this up, to the case for renationalizing in some form or nationalizing the railroads, which have in some cases in the past in the US been nationalized and are nationalized just as the norm in many other countries. So the idea that by having a publicly run system in some form, you would be able to have humane working conditions, you'd be able to have efficient service, you wouldn't cut train lines and cut schedules that actually leave shippers and companies and farmers in the lurch to absolutely maximize profit, which is what the railroad companies have been doing. So, you really could do things in a smart and somewhat democratic way that would prioritize climate and workers' rights, and just having an effective, sustainable rail system, and even reintroducing more robust passenger rail to the mix, which is something that a lot of people support. So this is a extremely interesting story on a topic, trains, that there's a lot of interest among the general public in, and then it also symbolizes kind of these larger questions about labor and the power to strike, and the very concept of nationalized and public utilities and services that are so central to our lives, but in many cases have been taken over by huge companies. So I'll leave it at that, but I think the story hopefully is something that will continue to play out for many years to come with railroads specifically, and also offers some insight into other industries and just other economic questions about public ownership and regulation. So thanks.
Thank you, Kari. Appreciate you talking about your article. It's been a while since I read it, so it was fantastic to hear again. I'm going to pass it on to Robert, one of our other co-editors.
Yeah, it's been really fantastic working with Ben and Kari and Kevin putting this book together. I teach labor relations at the graduate level at San Jose State University, and I'm a rank and file organizer in my faculty union there. And when we got together, we decided that we wanted to put together a book with a number of short articles, like Kevin was talking about before, that can be used for member education, not just in the classroom, although I do use real world globalization in my globalization class. And I particularly am excited about what's happening in the labor movement over the last couple of years. We've heard a lot about big strikes, although we haven't seen a lot of growth in membership for various reasons. These strikes have been pretty extraordinary, not just in their size and their impact, but also because the issue of capitalism has really been at the front and center of several of them, particularly with the SAG-AFTRA strike in Hollywood, where SAG-AFTRA President Drescher denounced Hollywood for exploiting the workers, she said, who make the machine run, to quote her. And then, of course, we have the UAW strike, the stand-up strike that really brought the three large automakers to their knees, and we're seeing it spread throughout the South. And of course, a brand new president who was elected just a couple of weeks before bargaining began, Sean Fain, famously wore "Eat the Rich" in his weekly press conferences and reports to the members, and gave an incredibly inspiring speech in which he denounced the workers for being accused of engaging in class warfare, because after all, we've been victimized by 40 years of class warfare, to paraphrase him. And what's really turned the corner in these couple of strikes, which illustrates also the growing attention of the American population for critique of capitalism, is capitalism itself. And so what we tried to do was put together a book that has not only short articles, like Kevin was talking about, that can supplement a kind of how-to nuts and bolts kind of training for your members or your students, or both, but also nice, short, easy to read, accessible pieces on different aspects of capitalism that can help in member education and organizing, particularly in the section chapter 2 on capitalism. We have great introductory pieces by Royce on what is capitalism, what is a corporation, that can really get your members and students starting to talk about these widely accepted concepts that we don't really talk about too much in a very overt way, a very intentional way. We also have short pieces on economic inequality and how it's tied to wages. We also have a great piece on the authoritarianism of the workplace, the lack of freedom of speech and bodily integrity in the workplace. We have a piece in that chapter as well on the impacts of gender and the impacts on immigrant workers. And it closes off with a piece that Kevin and I wrote that we had published together on management rights. And we close off this chapter with the piece on management rights to illustrate that one of the most fundamental aspects of contracts over the last half a century has been that we waive all rights not excluded under the collective bargaining agreement to management. In other words, management manages. Unions are left to respond to those decisions. And how is this connected to capitalism? And what Kevin and I do in that short piece is we engage with this idea that that workers shouldn't have a say over how we organize the workplace, and that management rights clauses are really an assumption of the employer that the workplace is their private property. And so it really gets at this very question of, in our organizing, how do we confront that very issue of property that's at the basis of capitalism? So I think we put together a really great collection with a wide variety of really short, accessible pieces, many of them already published in Dollars and Cents, that, like Kevin said, you can read at the beginning of a meeting and have a great discussion. And like Kari and Lynn were talking about, you can go into your reading session with a great prompt that can get folks talking and thinking and strategizing. And I hope that folks will agree and find the book useful in their efforts.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Kari. And now that we've heard a little bit more about the contents of the book, Ben is going to come back and join us and talk about how folks can order it for their classes, for their union hall and the like.
Sorry about that. Sure. Thank you for those great sort of snippets, Robert and Kari. This were wonderful, and Lynn for sharing your experience with the previous edition. So, of course, the most straightforward way to order the book is directly from our website, which I will put the link in the chat right now. That will get you a single copy of the book right here, direct from us. We are also, we're very experienced working with college bookstores. So if you're interested in ordering this book for a class, the best way to do that is to have your bookstore reach out to us, which I will put the email in the chat, which is dollars@dollarsandcents.org. We're happy to offer complimentary exam copies to instructors or to union political education folks who are considering adopting the book for courses. So if that's something that you're interested in, please do get in touch. We'll happily send you a complimentary copy. And we can also do direct bulk orders if you say you work for a union and you don't have a bookstore like a university might. You can simply email us, let us know what you're interested in, how many copies you might need, and we'll happily work something out with you to send you a bulk discount. We can also do bulk subscriptions if that's something that's interesting to you to the magazine. I think something that Kevin was alluding to earlier is that it really is useful to combine the book with the magazine because the book is organized in a thematic way. The magazine, of course, is based on current events. So most of the examples that are in the book are from the last 5 years, but of course, as time goes on, more things are going to happen. So we're happy to figure out ways for folks to integrate the magazine with the book as well. Lastly, I will say that if you're organizing with a lesser resourced labor organization, like a workers group or a workers center, or certainly we want the book to be in your hands too, and we do not want cost to be a barrier. So please do get in touch with us at the email below, and we will happily work with you to provide either copies of the book or PDFs or chapter excerpts. We really do want this material to get out there and to be useful to the workers movement. So please order if you can, and if you can't, please still get in touch and we'll happily work something out. Thanks again. And I think now we are going to move on to questions. Is that right, Kevin?
We certainly are. So any participants who would like to ask questions, either about the content of the book or other things regarding dollars and cents, feel free to go on ahead. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to stop the recording so that folks can feel free and comfortable to hop off mute, and just feel free to ask questions away of any of the folks that spoke tonight.